The studio buzzed with anticipation as Stephen Colbert leaned forward in his chair, his trademark grin masking a glint of mischief. Across from him sat Elon Musk, the tech titan whose presence commanded attention, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp, ready for a verbal spar. The audience, a mix of loyal fans and curious onlookers, sensed something electric in the air. This wasn't just another late-night interview. This was a collision of worlds, the quick-witted satirist versus the billionaire visionary. What could go wrong? Or more tantalizingly, what could go right? The topic of the night, artificial intelligence and its role in shaping humanity's future, was no accident. It was a cultural flashpoint, a subject that stirred passions and divided opinions. Why had Colbert chosen this? Was he baiting Musk, hoping to provoke a soundbite that would dominate the news cycle? Or was there something deeper at play, a personal stake neither man would admit? Colbert opened with a light jab, poking fun at Musk's ambitious timelines for colonizing Mars. The audience laughed, but Musk's smile was thin, his response measured, deflecting the humor with a comment about humanity's need to outpace its own destruction. The host nodded, but his eyes narrowed, steering the conversation toward artificial intelligence. He asked Musk about the ethical dilemmas of machines that could think like humans, machines that might one day outstrip their creators. Was Musk, Colbert wondered aloud, playing God by pushing these technologies forward? The question hung in the air and the audience leaned in, sensing the shift. Musk countered smoothly, arguing that artificial intelligence was a tool, not a deity, and that fearing it was like fearing fire. But Colbert wasn't satisfied. He pressed harder, citing recent public outcry over job losses tied to automation, families struggling as factories shuttered. Wasn't Musk's vision, Colbert suggested, a bit callous toward those left behind? The tension was subtle but growing. Musk's fingers tapped lightly on the armrest, a tell of irritation, while Colbert's voice took on a sharper edge, his jokes landing with less warmth. The audience began to murmur, some nodding in agreement with the host, others bristling at the implied accusation. Why was Colbert pushing so hard? Was he genuinely concerned about the societal cost of artificial intelligence, or was this just theater, a chance to dunk on a billionaire for clicks? Musk, for his part, seemed ready to play along, but there was a hardness in his gaze, a warning that he wasn't here to be a punching bag. He leaned forward, his voice low but firm, defending his work as a necessary leap for progress. The exchange was still civil, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. Each man was sizing up the other, testing boundaries, searching for weaknesses. The segment neared its first commercial break. Colbert landed a pointed jab, questioning whether Musk's companies were more about ego than altruism. The audience gasped, then laughed nervously, unsure whether to applaud or wince. Musk's jaw tightened, but he didn't snap back, not yet. Instead, he offered a cryptic remark about the dangers of misunderstanding innovation, his tone carrying just enough edge to hint at what was to come. The stage lights dimmed, and the show cut to ads, leaving the audience buzzing with questions. What was Musk holding back? Would Colbert keep pushing, or had he already gone too far? The stage was set for something bigger, something that would unravel in ways no one could predict.
Hi there. If you're a fan of Team Musk or Team Colbert, hit that subscribe button and get ready for the rest of the tale.
The studio lights flared back to life, and the audience's chatter hushed as Stephen Colbert adjusted his tie, his smile a touch more forced than before. Elon Musk sat opposite, his posture unchanged, but his expression harder, as if the commercial break had only sharpened his resolve. The energy in the room had shifted, the earlier playfulness giving way to something rawer, more confrontational. Colbert dove back in, picking up where he'd left off, his questions now laced with a moral urgency. He spoke of artificial intelligence's potential to widen inequality, painting a vivid picture of workers displaced by algorithms, their livelihoods sacrificed for corporate profits. The audience clapped at the sentiment, but Musk's face remained impassive, his silence louder than any rebuttal. Colbert, sensing the crowd's support, pressed further, asking Musk how he justified the social cost of his innovations. The question wasn't just about technology. It was personal, a challenge to Musk's very ethos. The host's tone carried a hint of accusation, as if Musk alone bore responsibility for the world's growing divides. The audience leaned forward, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. Musk finally responded, his voice calm but cutting, dismantling the premise with a surgeon's precision. He argued that stagnation, not innovation, was the real threat to society, that clinging to outdated systems would doom humanity to collapse. His words were measured, but there was an undercurrent of disdain, as if he found Colbert's moralizing simplistic, even naive. The host wasn't ready to let it go. He pivoted to a recent controversy, a wave of public backlash against Musk's companies for their role in automating industries. Colbert cited stories of communities gutted by job losses, families struggling to survive. His voice rose, tinged with indignation, as he asked Musk whether he ever considered the human toll of his grand visions. The audience erupted in applause, but Musk didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back, his eyes narrowing, and countered with a pointed question of his own. Did Colbert truly believe halting progress would save those families, or was he just pandering to the crowd? The room fell silent, the jab landing like a thunderclap. For the first time, Colbert seemed caught off guard, his grin faltering as he scrambled to regain control. The exchange grew heated, each man digging in. Colbert doubled down, accusing Musk of dodging accountability, while Musk fired back, calling the host's framing short-sighted, even hypocritical. The audience was split, some cheering Colbert's passion, others murmuring in support of Musk's unapologetic stance. The air crackled with tension, every word a potential spark. Musk's fingers no longer tapped. They gripped the armrest, his patience visibly thinning. Colbert, sensing blood, leaned in for another jab, but Musk cut him off mid-sentence, his voice sharp, accusing the host of twisting his words for cheap applause. The audience gasped, the interruption bold, almost rude, but Musk didn't back down. He spoke over the murmurs, his tone icy, dismantling Colbert's argument with a mix of logic and barely veiled contempt. As the segment neared its end, the confrontation hung unresolved, the two men locked in a verbal stalemate. Colbert tried to steer back to humor, but his jokes fell flat, the audience too gripped by the drama to laugh. Musk, meanwhile, sat stone-faced, his silence a challenge in itself. The stage manager signaled for a break, and the lights dimmed once more, leaving the room buzzing with unease. The argument wasn't over. It was only escalating, and everyone could feel it. The studio lights flared, cutting through the charged silence as Stephen Colbert forced a laugh, his attempt to diffuse the tension falling flat. The audience, still buzzing from the previous segment's verbal sparring, sat on edge, their eyes darting between the host and Elon Musk. Musk's posture was unyielding, his stare fixed on Colbert with an intensity that seemed to dare him to push further. The room felt like a powder keg, every gesture and word threatening to ignite the next explosion. Colbert, sensing the need to regain control, leaned forward, his tone now a blend of charm and challenge. He pivoted the conversation back to artificial intelligence, but this time he framed it through a lens of public fear, citing viral stories of algorithms gone rogue, spreading misinformation and eroding trust. Wasn't Musk, he asked, worried about the chaos his creations could unleash? Musk's response was immediate, his voice steady but laced with impatience. He dismissed the fear-mongering as short-sighted, arguing that the real danger lay in stifling innovation, not in pushing its boundaries. His words carried a quiet authority, but there was an edge to them, a hint that he was tiring of defending himself against what he saw as bad faith attacks. The audience was divided, some nodding at Musk's logic, others murmuring in support of Colbert's populist stance. The host, undeterred, pressed harder, bringing up recent headlines about Musk's companies facing scrutiny for their labor practices amid automation rollouts. He painted a grim picture of workers replaced by machines, their dignity discarded for profit. The accusation landed heavily, and the crowd erupted in applause, emboldening Colbert to lean in further. But Musk wasn't backing down. His eyes flashed with defiance as he countered, accusing Colbert of cherry-picking stories to inflame emotions rather than engage with the bigger picture. The rebuke was sharp, and for a moment Colbert's composure slipped, his smile tightening as the audience gasped. Musk didn't stop there. He challenged the host's sincerity, suggesting that his outrage was less about workers and more about scoring points with the crowd. The room grew tense, the air thick with anticipation. Colbert tried to pivot with a joke, but it landed awkwardly, the audience too gripped by the confrontation to laugh. Sensing an opening, Musk pressed his advantage, his voice rising slightly, as he dismantled Colbert's narrative, framing it as a tired trope peddled by those too afraid to embrace change. The exchange escalated into a rapid-fire volley, each man refusing to yield. Colbert accused Musk of arrogance, of believing his wealth insulated him from the consequences of his actions. Musk shot back, calling Colbert a performer who thrived on outrage, but offered no solutions. The audience was split, some cheering, the host's passion, others captivated by Musk's unapologetic conviction. The stage manager's signal for a break was a mercy, but it came too late to quell the fire. As the lights dimmed, Colbert's face betrayed a flicker of unease, while Musk sat back, his expression one of cold satisfaction. The argument had reached a new peak, and the next round promised to be even more brutal. The studio lights blazed back on, illuminating a room thick with tension. Stephen Colbert, his jaw set, tried to reclaim the narrative with a disarming smile, but the gesture felt hollow after the previous round's bruising exchange. Elon Musk sat opposite, his demeanor icy, his earlier restraint replaced by a palpable readiness to strike. The audience, now fully invested, leaned forward, their murmurs a mix of excitement and unease. Colbert, determined to steer the conversation, shifted to a new angle, probing Musk's vision for artificial intelligence's role in global governance. He framed it provocatively, suggesting that Musk's push for autonomous systems could undermine democratic institutions, handing power to unaccountable tech giants. The accusation was bold, and the crowd stirred, some clapping, others waiting for Musk's response. Musk didn't hesitate. His voice, low and deliberate, cut through the applause, dismissing Colbert's premise as a fear-driven fantasy. He argued that decentralized technology could empower people, not enslave them, and that clinging to outdated systems was the real threat to freedom. His words were sharp, laced with a barely concealed contempt for what he saw as Colbert's pandering. The host, sensing the crowd's divided loyalties, doubled down, citing recent concerns about data privacy and surveillance tied to Musk's companies. He painted a chilling picture of a world where algorithms controlled lives, stripping away autonomy. The audience roared in support, but Musk's expression darkened, his patience fraying. The confrontation took a nastier turn as Colbert pressed further, his tone now openly accusatory. He suggested that Musk's relentless pursuit of innovation bordered on recklessness, a disregard for the chaos left in his wake. The jab was personal, and the room felt it, the air growing heavier with each passing second. Musk's response was a verbal gut punch. He accused Colbert of hypocrisy, pointing out the host's reliance on corporate media platforms that thrived on division and sensationalism. The audience gasped, the insult landing like a slap. Musk's voice rose, his words dripping with scorn, as he called Colbert a mouthpiece for the status quo, more interested in clicks than truth. The crowd was stunned, some booing, others cheering, the room fracturing into chaos. Colbert, visibly rattled, tried to regain his footing, but his usual wit faltered. His comeback, a jab at Musk's wealth, felt desperate, and the audience's laughter was sparse. Musk seized the moment, his tone now unrelenting as he dismantled Colbert's moral posturing, framing it as a performance rooted in envy rather than principle. The exchange was no longer a debate, it was a demolition. The host's face flushed, his confidence crumbling under the weight of Musk's verbal onslaught. The stage manager signaled frantically for a break, but the damage was done. As the lights dimmed, the audience buzzed with shock, the raw intensity of Musk's attack lingering like smoke. Colbert's authority had been shaken, and the next segment loomed with the promise of retribution or collapse. The studio lights snapped on, their harsh glow exposing the raw nerves of the moment. Stephen Colbert, his composure frayed, gripped his desk, his eyes betraying a mix of defiance and desperation. Elon Musk, by contrast, exuded a cold confidence, his earlier verbal assault having shifted the dynamic unmistakably in his favor. The audience, caught in the thrall of the escalating drama, sat in tense silence, their loyalties splintered. Colbert, aware that his credibility was on the line, tried to pivot, steering the conversation toward a safer topic, Musk's recent ventures into renewable energy. But the attempt felt forced, a transparent bid to escape the quagmire of their artificial intelligence debate. The crowd sensed the retreat, and their murmurs grew restless. Musk, seizing the opportunity, refused to let the conversation stray. He brought it back to Colbert's earlier accusations, his tone now laced with a mocking edge. He challenged the host to define his stance on progress, questioning whether Colbert truly understood the stakes of technological advancement or was merely parroting popular fears. The question was a trap, and Colbert stumbled into it, his response a muddled defense of caution that lacked the fire of his earlier attacks. The audience's reaction was tepid, some shifting uncomfortably, others whispering in agreement with Musk's relentless logic. The host, sensing the room slipping away, tried to rally with a personal anecdote about technology's impact on everyday people, but it rang hollow, overshadowed by the weight of Musk's earlier blows. The tension boiled over when Colbert, in a bid to regain control, made a sharp remark about Musk's public persona, implying that his brash style alienated more people than it inspired. The jab was meant to sting, but it backfired spectacularly. Musk's eyes gleamed with disdain as he unleashed a scathing retort, calling Colbert a coward who hid behind humor to avoid real accountability. The insult was vicious, cutting deeper than anything before, and the audience erupted, some gasping, others cheering. Musk didn't stop. He accused the host of weaponizing his platform to tear down those who dared to challenge the status quo, his words dripping with contempt. The room was chaos, the crowd's noise drowning out Colbert's attempt to respond, his face a mask of shock and humiliation. Colbert tried to salvage the moment, his voice rising as he accused Musk of arrogance, but the words lacked conviction, swallowed by the audience's fervor. Musk sat back, his expression one of triumph, letting the host's flailing speak for itself. The stage manager's signal for a break was almost inaudible amid the uproar, the lights dimming on a scene of utter disarray. Colbert's authority had crumbled, his usual charm buried under the weight of Musk's unrelenting verbal barrage. The audience, electrified, buzzed with anticipation, sensing that the next segment would either see Colbert's redemption or his complete unraveling, with Musk poised to deliver the final blow. The studio lights flared, their intensity mirroring the raw emotion pulsing through the room. Stephen Colbert, his face flushed with a mix of anger and resolve, leaned forward, his hands clenched tightly on his desk. The audience, still reeling from Elon Musk's devastating verbal assault, watched with bated breath, sensing that the host was at a breaking point. Musk, his demeanor unshaken, sat with a faint smirk, his eyes locked on Colbert, daring him to try reclaiming the stage. The air crackled with the weight of what had transpired. The earlier debate about artificial intelligence now a distant spark that had ignited a full-blown inferno. Colbert, desperate to turn the tide, abandoned any pretense of civility and launched into a direct attack, accusing Musk of exploiting his wealth and influence to silence critics. The accusation was a gamble, meant to rally the audience's populist instincts, but it landed unevenly. Some clapped, emboldened by Colbert's defiance, while others murmured, wary of the host's increasingly personal tone. Musk's response was swift and brutal. He leaned forward, his voice low but venomous, and called Colbert a fraud who profited from outrage while pretending to champion the common man. The insult was not just rude, it was a surgical strike exposing the host's vulnerabilities in front of a now divided crowd. The audience gasped, the room splitting further as some booed Musk's audacity while others cheered his unapologetic candor. Colbert, stung, tried to interrupt, but Musk powered through, his words relentless, accusing the host of trivializing complex issues for laughs and clout. The confrontation reached its zenith when Colbert, his voice shaking with fury, demanded that Musk leave the set. The ultimatum was a desperate bid to assert control, but it backfired spectacularly. Musk didn't flinch. Instead, he stood, his presence towering, and delivered a final, humiliating blow. He mocked Colbert's need for applause to feel relevant, suggesting that the host's entire career was built on pandering to a room rather than standing for anything real. The audience erupted into chaos, some shouting in protest, others roaring in approval, the noise deafening. Colbert's face drained of color, his authority shattered as Musk's words hung in the air, undeniable in their cruelty. The stage manager, frantic, signaled for security, but Musk didn't wait. He turned and walked off, his exit deliberate, leaving the host alone under the glaring lights. The room was a maelstrom of emotion, the audience's reactions a cacophony of cheers, boos, and stunned whispers. Colbert, visibly shaken, tried to address the crowd, but his words were drowned out, his usual charisma buried under the weight of his public humiliation. The lights dimmed for a break, but the energy lingered, the audience grappling with what they'd witnessed. Musk's departure wasn't just a walk-off, it was a statement, a triumph that left Colbert's reputation in tatters and the show on the brink of collapse. The studio lights returned, their glare unforgiving as Stephen Colbert sat alone, the empty chair opposite him a stark reminder of Elon Musk's dramatic exit. The audience, still buzzing from the chaos, watched with a mix of pity and anticipation, unsure whether the host could salvage the wreckage of the night. Colbert's face, etched with strain, betrayed the toll of the confrontation, but there was a flicker of determination in his eyes, a refusal to let Musk's parting blow define the moment. The room, fractured by the earlier uproar, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Colbert to either crumble or rise. He took a deep breath, his hand steadying on the desk, and began to speak, his voice raw but resolute, addressing the audience directly for the first time. He acknowledged the intensity of the exchange, admitting that the conversation had spiraled beyond his control. But instead of deflecting, he leaned into the discomfort, framing the clash as a reflection of the broader tensions gripping the world, the fear of change clashing with the drive for progress. His words were not defensive but introspective, a rare glimpse of vulnerability that silenced the crowd's restlessness. He spoke of his role as a host, not just to entertain, but to challenge, even when it meant risking failure. The audience, initially skeptical, began to nod, their murmurs softening as Colbert's sincerity cut through the lingering bitterness. The shift was palpable. Colbert didn't try to erase Musk's scathing remarks or pretend the humiliation hadn't happened. Instead, he owned it, turning the narrative on its head. He argued that moments like these, messy and painful, were necessary to confront the complexities of a world shaped by technology and ambition. His voice grew stronger, laced with a quiet conviction that resonated with the room. The crowd, once divided, began to coalesce, their applause building not out of reflex but genuine respect. Colbert's vulnerability became his strength, transforming the night's disaster into a testament to resilience. He didn't vilify Musk. Instead, he credited the billionaire's fierce perspective for forcing a reckoning, a nod that earned reluctant cheers from even Musk's supporters. As the segment drew to a close, Colbert stood, addressing the audience with a final triumphant note. He urged them to grapple with the questions raised, to reject easy answers in favor of hard truths. The room erupted in a standing ovation, the sound washing over him like redemption. The lights dimmed for the last time, but the energy lingered, the audience leaving not with the shock of Musk's walk-off, but with the weight of Colbert's comeback. The host had turned defeat into victory, not by outshouting his opponent, but by embracing the chaos and emerging stronger. The show ended, not in humiliation but in triumph, a cathartic resolution that left no question unanswered, no wound unhealed.